I love you.
Love you. Oh, good morning. This is Aisha Hauser. Welcome to the 2020 fall season of The VUU, the weekly show that centers liberation and centers Unitarian Universalism, faith in action, sponsored by the Church of the Larger Fellowship. I'm Aisha Hauser and I'm in Seattle, Washington, where the air is a little itty bitty better than it has been in about 2 weeks. Thinking of everyone who has been impacted and devastated by the fires this morning. I will pass it on to Christina Rivera.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Rivera. I'm coming to you from Augusta County, Virginia, where it is just heading right into fall. Like, I guess we're done with summer. I'm thinking we're done, but maybe, who knows? Maybe it'll come back. We'll see. But it's overcast and cloudy and sprinkly rain, and we can finally open our windows again at night. And so that's pretty exciting. And yeah, that's kind of my update for you all. Michael, how's it going?
Good morning, everyone. This is Michael Tino. I am joining you today from New Britain, Pennsylvania. We are at actually my parents' house for a couple of days because my child, who is 7, starts in-person school on Monday. And so we are spending as much time as we can with her grandparents who live close before she is exposed to other children. And that's the kind of calculations that we have to do these days. I'm doing okay. It's a beautiful day here in Pennsylvania, and that haze that is high up in the air is actually smoke from the west, which is far enough up that we can see it and be reminded that we are connected to the people out there, but so far up that we don't have to breathe it, which is a blessing for us and not for the people who do have to breathe it. It's, you know, that is it. And this is our first show as the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship. For those of you who don't know, Aisha, Chris, and I started August 1st in that role, and we'll talk more about that later. But we have like new hosts with us today, and Dawn Fortune has been a frequent guest host, and we'll let Dawn say hi. How are you today, Dawn?
I am doing all right. I'm Dawn Fortune. I am here in Egg Harbor City, New Jersey, which is where I live, and I've been here for a couple of years. I still haven't figured out where there are any eggs or there's a harbor, and this is the smallest city I've ever lived in. You know, total population around 4,000 or 5,000 people, you know. But here it is kind of gray. It has cooled off from the summer heat, for which I am grateful. And we are into the first of the church year and back up and running. And God, didn't we think we were all going to be back in person by now? You know, when this thing happened, when it sort of blew up in March, which lasted 6 months, you know, we all said, well, by September we'll all be back, right? And we're not. And that reality's happening. God help us. So anyway, I'm here. I'm glad to be here. And I'm afraid I'm going to mispronounce this, but is it Kiana?
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
All right, I'll hand it to you then.
So my name's Kiana Perkins. I'm physically located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but do not mistake that. I am a Minneapolis girl, tried and true. My mind is in 612, so all the time, it's the phone code. I also proudly get to serve here in Ann Arbor. I get to serve the UU Church here, the First Unitarian Congregation of Ann Arbor, with an amazing team of folks who I won't shout out to Reverend Manish. And I'm excited to be here. it's been a lot of fun to watch the show over the years, to be like a guest now and then, and now to be like this co-host. I'm just like all nervous and excited and proud because this is an amazing space with amazing people. So I'm just excited, and I look forward to whatever's coming. Bring it.
Hey, welcome everybody. And behind our chalice, I'm going to ask Tanner to come back. Tanner is our tech communications coordinator extraordinaire. Tanner, introduce yourself. Tell us where you are.
Hi, I am Tanner Linden. I live in Ventura, California. It's right between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. And I am so excited to be helping with tech this season on The VUU. Besides that, I run social media and our email lists and, all that content and stuff for the Church of the Larger Fellowship. So it's really great to be involved in this side of the ministry as well. I'm glad to be here.
Yay. And I want to invite whoever is watching, welcome. Ask us some of your questions. We are going to be talking about what's happening around the country, both in Unitarian Universalism and politically. We'll talk about the vote today, how congregational leaders are coping with what looks like to be the entire church year on Zoom, which, as Dawn just mentioned, was no one's plan. So let's start with how y'all are handling this. Kiana and Dawn, you're in brick and mortar, and we are going on as we've been going on as Church of Larger Fellowship that does not reside in a brick and mortar.
So it's really interesting you should say that. At UUAA, my current title is Coordinator of Congregational Life. And that could mean a lot of things and a lot of brick and mortar, but what it means for me is, it means, you ever realize you messed up and you're not filming this, so you got to keep going because it's live? Just had that moment. I was like, oh, I should stop it and re-record. Can't do that. So what I want to say is, it means that I really work with all the lay groups to make sure they're in alignment with their own mission and goals and alignment with our larger church. But I also get to do these amazing projects. And one of them that we're doing at UUAA, which I plan to write up so other folks can try to do it and replicate it, is we're doing Welcome You Back Week. And we do it WUUBW, like Welcome You Back, because we're UUs and we like to, whenever you can double a U, it's the best. That makes it better, right? Like that's in the books, right? So we have had between the 10th of September and then ending next week, different presentations from different people in the congregation. So membership, music is tonight. If you've ever wanted to know about UUAA and Dr. Reverend, he's just a regular Dr. Glenn Thomas, not a Reverend yet. If you ever wanted to know how we run our music program and the things that we offer, that's going to be offered this evening. We have stewardship talking. So we basically said, what do people experience and love in the social hall, and how do we move that to a palatable digital format? Nobody wants to sit online for 7 hours, but if we do 45 minutes here, an hour here, and we make it relevant to what people want to know, they'll show up. So have the numbers been outrageous? No, but are people coming and getting what they need to feel connected to community? Are people getting a chance to ask some questions they've never been able to ask because they didn't know who or where? Yes. So we've really tried to say, this is our digital year and we're embracing it and we're loving it. We're not fighting it and just falling into it. And I think resistance won't get us very far. And so it's kind of, the question isn't like, are you going to be digital? It's like, how are you going to be your best digital self? And that shift of frame has made all the difference, I think, for me. Don, how about you over in your little pocket of the world?
My little pocket of the world. I am in South Jersey, which is its own little thing there. Keep in mind, I grew up in New England, so I am sports-wise deep behind enemy lines down here in
I can confirm that. Deep behind, I mean, you can't say Red Sox, you can't wear the paraphernalia. I grew up in Jersey. Yeah, that would be correct.
Yeah. And South Jersey, where I am, there are two distinct New Jerseys. There's Metro New York, and then there's South Jersey. And where I am, it's really quite rural. I had no idea this part of New Jersey existed. But to the point I'm getting to, and eventually I'll get there, is that we are geographically isolated. So the nearest city of any size is Philadelphia, and that's about an hour away. The nearest other congregation is Cherry Hill, and that's about an hour away. So what we experience here is sort of like an island culture, in that we are isolated, and we are really quite happy with what we've got. We've got all we need. You know, we have the ocean, we have Atlantic City if we want to make bad decisions, right?
How close is that again? Wait, what?
I live about 15 minutes from Atlantic City. You know, with all the bad fashion and poor life choices you could want in a lifetime. But we've got the beach, and we've got natural resources and beautiful, the Pine Barrens, and it's gorgeous. So why do we need to go to Philadelphia, where it's all, you know, highways and toll booths and parking lots and traffic, and the Phillies, right? So we've got this sort of isolation here, which is wonderful, but it adds a layer of challenge when we're doing online worship. You know, because of the isolation here, people very much rely on seeing each other each week. They really love to see each other's faces, to connect, because we serve people in 5 different counties. So people drive 45 minutes from different places, and this is the only time that they get to see each other. And they haven't been able to physically do that since late February, early March. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And one of the things that we've noticed, and we're a small church, we've got 100 members. And one of the things that we've noticed is that people seem to really crave the familiar right now. You know, when the world is upside down, they want worship to look as much like it did when they were in the building as they can, you know. And so we've incorporated some of those touchstones, the familiar hymns, the particular musical pieces that sort of anchor people emotionally and spiritually into the process. But it's, we're getting through, we're doing interesting things. Adult RE, I had 7 or 8 people last night at my Bible study for UUs and other skeptics. It was fascinating, really great conversation. So we're making our way. We're making our way, but it's a challenge, that's for sure. And I'll be really glad when we can get back together.
You know, it's so interesting to me hearing the different perspectives of people in different places, and we even have some folks in our chat sharing their experiences and perspectives, and I love that too. Judy Stetner from Tree of Life in McHenry, Illinois, said that they're all online with Zoom and enjoying being online, and the creativity it's forcing them into. But I also still serve a brick and mortar congregation 3/4 time in Mount Kisco, New York, and Mount Kisco is in Westchester County, which is the next county north of New York City. And if you were paying attention to the news in March, New Rochelle, which was the East Coast center of COVID cases, is also in Westchester County, same county in New York, and not very far from Mount Kisco geographically. And the New York metropolitan area was very, very hard hit by COVID this spring. And so my people are traumatized and still in that space. We had a socially distanced tailgate party after our in-gathering worship. We have a big enough parking lot that we could park every 2 or 3 parking spaces and fit, 40 families. and have people have their little lawn chairs. And we ordered individually wrapped sandwiches from Panera. And it was so beautiful and wonderful to see one another. And it was scary. Like even people with their masks on who only took the mask down to take a bite of their sandwich and then put their mask back on. There was, it brought up a trauma response is really the only way I could describe it in many people. And so we're having to do pastoral care because we wanted to spend an hour in the parking lot with one another. And we're dealing with that a lot. And the other thing that I find interesting, Dawn, you said your people want things to be as close to what they are used to as possible. Well, my folks are a little different than that. And I'm starting to get comments like, when we're back in person, I'm going to miss having visuals that go with our hymns. Right? I really want to be singing it with people, but I'm going to miss actually having something visually connected to the hymns. And I'm like, well, why do you have to miss it? I'm like, so I'm encouraging people, like, make a list of the things you think you're going to miss, because those are the things we're going to have to figure out how we keep. And that's
same
how
here.
Church is going to change. Forward. You know, nobody, I've been very clear in saying, you know, we've entered an era of accessibility in worship that we're not leaving. That I have, in fact, one 92 or 93-year-old member who hasn't been able to come physically to worship in about a year and a half, just because she broke her hip and she can't walk far enough to get to her car, much less from the car to the park into the building. So she just hasn't been there, and she's there every week on Zoom. And so I've said to my people, Nan is not going to miss another worship service. Like, it's just not going to happen. And they're like, yes, that's right. That's correct. That is the appropriate thing to do. So we're in this space, this very generative space of like saying, okay, well, how does church change for the better from the things we've learned? Kiana, you've been nodding. And
well, because I know that when we're in Zoom space, it's different than physical space. And so how you get affirmed and how people acknowledge you looks and feels different. So I do a lot of head nodding and a lot of smiling and a lot of facial gestures because I want you to know I'm hearing you. And the way that we've had to wrap around different people and different realities is real. So how you navigate this with older folks who are just learning technology versus, you know, at UUAA, our younger kids, our youth, whatever that means, they're meeting 3 times a week. They got a D&D game going online. And I'm giving Zoom 101, how to log in when it's a phone number and not a click this blue link. So there's this spectrum, right? And like, Don, you were talking about replicating what happens in service. And I guess for me, something that's happened is this shift, like, when the governors of our respective states said, you can't go outside unless you need to, that was one wave of understanding. And then when George Floyd died and there was protest on every continent, there was a second shift, like shift with an F. And so for me, it's this like, how do we let folks lean into those things, right? And so how do we let folks know the world we were in on March 10th doesn't exist anymore? The world that existed before May 26th doesn't exist anymore. So the things that we do now have to change. We can honor what was there and we can replicate some of that, but it is a falsehood to try to replicate that exact experience when the entire world has changed. For us, we do an amazing service. I'm bragging and I'm owning it. Our services are amazing, but what we thought we could do for a month, what we thought we could do for 3 months is now 6 months. And that model's not, it had 6 months of sustainability. So now we're having to shift our model, which isn't bad. It's saying it's our ability to pivot is a joy. Our ability to transition into something more new and beautiful that we never expected is a joy. So is it going to be hard to move from what we've been doing to something else? Yep. Is it going to suck for a while? Yep. And then we'll look back and go, did you see how quickly we were able to make that change because it was the best for all of us? And so I'm ready for that time. Not that, and I love the process, right? Like, oh, what doesn't work? Oh, what is working? And then I think when we do go back in person, whenever that is, I think there's still going to be an online element because we're realizing, as Michael said, the levels of accessibility it allows. It allows me not to try to dress me and my 3 kids and run out to church at 9:30 on a Sunday morning. It means that if my kid needs to sit on the floor and eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because they need to eat right now, I can still be in worship and I don't have to worry if there's a nut allergy I'm kicking off, you know? So there is so much blessing in this. I'm not saying that COVID is a blessing, but I think there is light in it and we have to find the light. I want to pivot just to talk about pivot. I do want to pivot just a little bit we can talk about the racial stuff because I think that was something we told people we were going to do. And we like to keep our word, but I want to make sure. So, you know, there's programming that has been happening in our UU sphere that has already been online. So you have, you know, the Church of Larger Fellowship where the pivot wasn't needed. It was, how do we increase the dialogue to match what's needed because the world's changed, right? And you have groups like Blue, Black Lives Unitarian Universalist, and I'm going to rep all day long. That's my spiritual center. So they just launched Havens. I asked Tanner to put a link up, but Havens is an opportunity for clusters of Black folks of this faith or who are adjacent to this faith to be a part of that, to be a part of a more intentional community and a more intentional space. And that just launched this week. Thank you, Paige Ingram and Michael Slack for getting that off the ground. And we also, what we were able to do during COVID, and Aisha, I'm going to call you out a little bit to speak to your experience with it, is we started basically religious education for Black children. And what makes Blueberries unique, we call it the Blueberry Jam, and then we got Berry Youth. Shout out to Lena and her Blueberry, because that's where that love comes from. That is a nod and a respect to the folks who come before. I don't walk on everybody's shoulders, but I walk on Lena's. I'm thankful for her. Just a little, you know, I had to do that. What makes Berries unique, a lot of spaces in Blue are closed. They're not closed. They are very sacredly held as all Black spaces. The thing that makes Blueberries beautiful and unique is that it is for Black children. So your point of entry is a Black child. And if you are not a Black parent, your child is still welcome into that space, and you're still welcome to be in that space with your child. So it's a unique space. We definitely offer faith and identity formation that is culturally specific, and we have a lot of fun in Blueberries. We're getting started back up for the fall. We'll start in October 3rd. I also put that link in the chat. But you know, some programs haven't had to pivot. They've had to just increase their output. And so Aisha's participated in Blueberries. Do you want to speak to that and that how digital programming is changing in all of those wonderful ways?
Sure. Basically, first of all, Blueberries is Kiana's brainchild. So I want to make sure that that's lifted up. And the invitation is that adults share their gifts, talents. So I did a little cooking segment, which kind of fulfilled a fantasy I've always had to be a chef on the Food Network. Another story for another day. And the Blue Youth one is going to be really impactful, I think, because one of the things that I moved to do is have an owl just for Black youth. I had a mom once say to me, I will not put my Black son with white children in an owl program, our whole lives, sexuality education. So that is one of the things that's on the to-do list for Blue Youth. But having spaces where Black youth and Black children can simply be without the white gaze, as to quote Toni Morrison, is simply crucial. And having the children who are living with white parents be part of this is giving pastoral care to them and affirming them as Black children and youth. I'm going to, Michael, you have a question here. Do AJ Van Tine, welcome. My dogs are going nuts. So Mike, I'm gonna throw it to you.
I guess there are questions. What does AJ say? AJ Van Tyne is joining us from Auburn, California, and says, major narrative is the 1-2 punch of COVID and now the historic fire season. Yeah, and people who are dealing with fires are siblings on the West Coast and our siblings on the Gulf Coast who are dealing with floods and hurricanes. It's amazing. My question is in line with what Michael is saying. What do we think we will keep doing even when the pandemic is quote unquote over? I think it's a great question. And I got at some of it, things will remain online in addition to being in person, and because it's an accessibility thing. I think that we'll still have small groups online. It makes a really big difference to me as a parent that I don't have to find a babysitter every time I want to go to a meeting. Especially, the first several years of my parenthood, my husband worked at night. So I had to pay a babysitter every time I had to go to a meeting. And now that we've normalized the fact that you can attend a meeting on a computer, I can put my child to bed and be at a meeting. And not be out $50 to go to a meeting or whatever it costs. Babysitters are hella expensive, y'all.
I want a babysit for you, man.
Worth every penny. I believe in paying babysitters a living wage. Thank you. I can't afford it, but I believe in it. What else do we think?
I think it's important that AJ put in his question, or in their question, the word, when the pandemic is over, they put the word over in quotes, because I think people really, really want the pandemic to be over now. And I remain so grateful that the UUA way back in, April or May, said, please plan to be closed and be online for this entire church year. And I think some folks need, a reminder of that. I'm a religious educator and an administrator, and in administrator spaces, I hear about boards that so desperately want to be back together, that they're, going in and trying to measure out their sanctuary for being 6 feet apart. And so I just, want to say to folks, it's not over. Number one, by no stretch of the imagination is it over. And I think the real question is, what are going to be our variables for what we determine is quote unquote over. For getting back in person. And so those are some of the questions that, your boards can start thinking about. But, I know that there's a large desire to be back together. We get that. We know that. We know that we love each other, and want to be back in community with each other physically. And I just really, encourage folks to, really take to heart what the UUA said. They haven't taken it back, right? If anything, UUA Boston headquarters is still closed. They made a decision to keep that closed. And so, maybe the focus right now isn't when are we getting back together in person. The focus is how do we continue to support community in the pandemic. And when we talk about community, we're not just talking about our UU community, but our community of humankind. And so what does that support look like in the uprising? What does that support look like in mutual aid in your communities? Because mutual aid is really just a fancy name for what communities of color have been doing all along. And
it's called congregate to congregate pastoral care. That's what mutual aid is.
No, it's something that our churches and our communities are experts at, and we're calling it mutual aid. Anyways, but those are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves, not how can we have 6 feet apart in our sanctuaries. That is made up work. It is taking us away from the questions that we actually need to be asking ourselves right now.
I think too, we need to move from the building to the individual, if that makes sense. So how do I connect and create clusters? Like this idea just popped in my head, y'all. I'm sorry. I'm all about that innovative ministry life. So at UUAA, what I did is create Q buddies. And so we, put people together who were maybe more vulnerable or needed more support with folks who that wasn't their reality. Those things we did it for 12 weeks, but people are still doing it because they loved their Q buddy, their quarantine buddy. But I wonder if there's an opportunity to make quarantine clusters and say, all right, you all live in the Hillside neighborhood. Hillside neighborhood's gonna have a gathering at the park once a month. And so instead of focusing on the building and focusing on how we can get back together, focusing on who can get together, who can be here now, who can share this experience with me now, who can go on a small walk with me. Some of the other electronic things I found are like recipe sharing. I'm kind of an Instapot girl. I don't know how, I didn't feel that one yet. Didn't resonate with the bell, didn't ring in my spirit. So I'm not going to own that. But like, there's ways that we could be connecting. Like, what are the meals let's make a recipe book. Let's make a poetry book. How can we do things that don't require me to be this close, 6 feet from you in the same building? And how can we tap into those and give those life? And I also think we as a collective culture need to think about how much weight we put into a physical building. This building, we have spent thousands upon thousands of dollars to heat it, cool it, Wi-Fi it, soundproof it, carpet it, paint it, blah, 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 blah. And it's been sitting quiet for 6 months, but the church is thriving. So we have to really think about our relationship to physical space. Don't you love when people call you? Pretty sure yeah. So, and then, I'm gonna learn how to turn my phone off during the VUU. Skill I'm gonna acquire. So I guess my whole point is we have to really think about our relationship and why we need people so much. That was my point. It's fine to need people, but need the right people. Just being in the room for me, I don't always take a lot away from being in a room with 60-year-old white retirees from the U of M. Like, being in that room and being with my people are two different things. So it's like, how do we shift our energy to making sure the right people are in the room who are going to feed us and not just bodies in a room? I'll let that go from there.
That's a word and a half. And that's been, I think, what the invitation for Unitarian Universalism kind of all along. Like, this isn't about getting a group of people in a room and then giving a TED Talk. It's about how are we connecting people to each other, to affirm each other. I mean, one of when you hear, I remember I listened to Reverend Gail Gessenheimer. I still think back to when she gave a sermon at GA about walking in, being a butch lesbian, walking into a small Maine UU congregation and just being loved, I mean, and if we can really affirm, how do we love each other more? How do we affirm each other in the fullness of who we are? And Unitarian Universalism, like, the more this pandemic especially has been going on, I feel like I've become more UU and more moved to fulfill the potential of what this faith can be. I think Dawn was raising her hand.
The Gail Geisenheimer thing, that was the church, that was the place where I experienced my call to ministry. It was at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Ellsworth, Maine, which is where Gail first encountered Unitarian Universalism. And yeah, so I know that church, I know that community well. I think it's fascinating. My people, as much as they crave the familiar, there's also that piece that are like, well, when we come back, we need to, right? Because we've had a couple who we haven't seen in the church. I think I saw the husband once or twice since I first got here, and I just started my 4th year. His wife has Alzheimer's, and she's confined at home, and he's her primary caregiver, and they never miss church now. Right? They never miss church now. And it became really clear when we started seeing some of those folks that we hadn't seen in a while, that when we go back into the building, there's just no question we have to do this hybrid. We have to do this hybrid. We have to figure out whatever it is with licensing and whatever it is with music and whatever it is, however, like whatever it is that we need to make sure that we keep doing this online for the folks who can't get to our physical building. And oh baby, didn't I hear about the edifice complex, right? The edifice complex, the we love our building. I'm from New England, right? Where you've got 300-year-old buildings, right? But here I am in this wonderful little congregation that is super proud of its building because it was completely green construction. It was sustainably built. It has geothermal something or other. I don't know whether it's hot or cold, but we've got it, right? And bamboo floor and solar panels and it's been sitting there empty, and people are losing their minds because they identify strongly with the seventh tradition, and that manifested itself in how they built their building. Their building is sort of a monument to their commitment to the seventh tradition. And now we're having to look at this. What does it mean when we can't be in our building? And it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and you know, and there's anxiety, and there's all that stuff. I mean, everybody's worried about money. Everybody's worried about the budget. Everybody's worried about finances. Yeah, it's the conversation about, and this congregation existed for 10 years before they built the building. So this congregation is only 21 and 22 years old. So for them, building the church, building the building is the seminal event in their shared memory, in their shared experience. So there's a lot of emotion in that concept of the building and what it means to this congregation to be Unitarian Universalist and to live out our values in this world. So there's so much to unpack, and we are blessed to have a physician and a couple of microbiologists in our membership who are on the committee to figure out what the protocols are going to be like for how and when we start to gather in person, what that will look like, and what accessibility measures need to happen. But I think we're all largely in the same kind of place. You know, we're making this up as we go along. Ain't nobody around now that remembers what they did in 1918. You know, I got some seniors in my congregation, but they're not that old, right? So we're all having to figure it out, and boy, oh boy, it's more work than. That's something I want to just shout out to my religious educator people, especially. How to do RE, especially with small children who have been limited, many of them limited by their parents as to just how much screen time they get in the course of a day. And now they have to get all of their school through screen time. And if they're anything like me, by the end of that, who wants to go to church on screen, you know, or do RE on screen, or like just, oh man, like trying to do that with grownups is hard enough. Trying to do that with children, I can't even imagine. God bless you. Yeah.
Yeah, my husband is teaching RE for the first time this year to make sure that our 7-year-old gets there. because I've got church in the morning, I got church in the evening. Sunday is done for me. Kiana?
I was just going to say, so like for Blue with Black Lives Unitarian Universalist, we have to create a program that's super dynamic because we're asking folks to show up at 2:00 on a Saturday.
Mhm.
And so when you talk about like, it can't just be the same old RE, it can't just be like, where's the manual? It's grade 2 and flip a page. So we're adding some components this year that I just want to brag about. We're going to do these things called berry bags because I love alliteration. And so it's an opportunity for us to send kids stuff, to have them have a fun bag. We're adding in some parent roundtables, having discussions about having hard discussions and also having one about faith formation, get information. And so these opportunities, like you can't just offer what's always been offered. You have to be a little more dynamic because kids are online. Like so I have both of my kids are in online school. So there's this very, like Don was speaking to, this very distinguished, this is school screen, this is play screen, this is mom said you have to go screen. And so it's this, yesterday they were doing a meeting for 6th to 8th graders as part of Welcome You Back Week. And Abijah was like, I don't want to go. And I couldn't make her. I couldn't force her because I could tell she had been online all day. She was like, I'm done, mama. And so having to honor our limits is a big deal right now and saying no. There's so many amazing conferences online. Like, I'm like, I have the VUU, but Adrienne Marie Brown is speaking about something at noon. Do I have to, like, we're all having to make choices about how we use our screen time. And if we're making them, our kids definitely are making them too. That awareness of how we do our programming can't be the same. I can't come give a TED talk or a lecture. I need to have slides and be a little bit funner. So it's more prep, but it's also the best prep because it means I'm making sure the content is what people need so that it stays.
Mm. So before we move on, I want to mention one other thing that I love about being online that I hope that I believe has shifted our culture a little bit, and in a positive way that I think needs to stay whenever we're wherever we are after this hopefully ends. And that is, it has become the norm down at the bottom of our screens to put pronouns next to our names on Zoom. And I, as someone who has recently changed the pronouns that I use for myself in an attempt to be more whole, people have noticed that more than me preaching about it or writing about it or newsletter columns or anything. And like, I now have a letter of agreement with a congregation that I served for 14 years that uses the correct pronouns in referring to me. And like, it's been like a year and a half, and they're like, we just noticed that. Like, we've been doing this wrong, haven't we? And I've been like, yeah, I just haven't wanted to push it because like there's only so much I have to push that with. And I can't be the only person who's noticed that our culture has shifted because we actually notice what people say down there. And I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's such a shout out to the different ways that we learn, right? That we all of a sudden are really having to pay attention to how do people learn? How do they actually take in information and process it and use it, into their everyday lives? And I think having to be so much more intentional about it and so much more intentional about that there are lots of ways that people process information and, I know for me personally, like, I love going to church. Like, I love church. I love sermons. I love music. I love the entire worship experience. Like, you pop me down in a church in a sanctuary on Sunday morning, I'm just happy as a clam. But it's hard for me to take in information auditory only. that's one of the hardest ways for me to take in and retain information. I need to see it written, and often I'm the one writing it down, because once I write it down and I see it, then my brain is processing it. And yeah, exactly. Michael's showing his notes right now, and but just knowing that about myself. I found that out, I think, during college, when they make you take these assessments or at least I had an assessment. It has really helped me. And so it also reminds us that the information that we're trying to transmit in this different medium really has to take into consideration all of those different ways that people are bringing in information. So we're lucky that we have some time to do that. As Kiana said, we're not lucky to be experiencing the pandemic, but we have to take the things that are beautiful about it and hold on to those too, as well as the things that are really, really ugly about it. We wanted to talk about UU the Vote. So UU the Vote is on a tear. Boy, we are, 60 some odd days and counting? Is that right? It feels like that's right. I think it's right. And 52, Michael says. So UU the Vote is on a tear. They are getting all of their information out in lots of different ways. We hope to have them on sometime between now and Election Day to really kind of dial into what Unitarian Universalists can be doing. But I'm just wondering, from the rest of our co-hosts, what have you seen in your areas?
Well, I've been getting the UU the Vote information. I know that the Houston First Church Houston has, I think, registered or made 12,000 calls or texts just out of that one congregation. And what's happening is UU the Vote is connecting folks in swing states and reminding folks to get registered. And it's, in this garbage death cult government we're under right now, some days I just feel so freaking helpless. And to feel that there is something that can be done is powerful. So shout out to Nicole Presley and Ashley Horan with UU the Vote. And as Chris said, we will have them on. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think I should have mentioned, when I was talking about UU the Vote, and as Aisha said, this is just one thing that we can be doing as Unitarian Universalists. It's not the end all be all. We know that, but it is a thing, and it is a thing that we do need to be doing. And I know Leslie Mack is doing a countdown to the date that I think she's doing it on TikTok or Instagram or both, that has a just informational about how to vote and where to vote and all of that kind of thing every day from now until voting day. But one of the biggest things that we want to say is in-person voting is your last opportunity to vote. Like, there are a lot of opportunities before that to vote. And we want to make sure that people understand that, because we understand that the current way the administration is looking at the election cycle is how to disenfranchise as many voters as humanly possible. That is the game plan for right now for how to keep this administration in power. And so you need to be aware of what the most enfranchised way to have that vote is in your particular area. So I really encourage people to, as they should say, get onto the UU the Vote email chain, subscribe to Leslie's daily update. It's great, and she's doing it as fun. So it's like 20-second get out the vote kind of thing. So make sure you folks are out there.
Well, and in-person voting has already started early voting in some places. I mean, North Carolina, you can already go to your Board of Elections and cast your ballot in North Carolina. So my Tar Heel brethren and sistren and siblings of all genders out there, go vote. Go do it now. Vote in North Carolina. You know, I think it's great that we are connecting folks to people in swing states. And I want to say, like, I'm from New York, which is like it's not a swing state. It's just not. And there has been a lot of reticence before now to do that, to do outreach to people in swing states. And this year, in this pandemic year, I mean, part of it is, I love Aisha's phrase, "garbage death cult." I will use Aisha's phrase to describe this administration. Part of it is just how horrible this administration is, but part of it is we are getting so used to connecting to people no matter where they are, that to call someone in North Carolina and say, please go vote, is not a big deal anymore. Or to call someone in Michigan, even though you live in New York, or to call someone in Pennsylvania, even though you live in New York, is so much less of a deal now that my people are like, sure, okay, sign me up. I'll call people in Wisconsin. Great. Like, whatever. Like, I can connect with people on Zoom in Wisconsin just as much as I can connect with them in New York. And I appreciate that too.
Some of the work that we're doing locally is we have a group called UU Civs. They're very sure to be nonpartisan. That is a very big thing because we are still a church. We still have that tax designation, and we honor and respect that to the fullest. They have been making kits for folks who are traditionally disenfranchised here in Michigan, and I could be messing this up, so just, caveat. Folks who are in jail but have not been gone to trial still have the ability to vote. And so they've been making information packets for those folks to help them make sure they understand their right to vote, and some of, information to that degree. So it's actually been really cool to not just find the folks we know are going to vote. Because in Ann Arbor, that's, we're a education town. This university is not small, and it does not produce smallness, right? It's a massive university. And so I've really pushed our community to say, don't just go to brown neighborhoods you think we don't vote. Get a book, get some Google research. Brown people do vote, but they're disenfranchised. So don't come to brown folks and say, go vote. Come to brown folks and say, why are you disenfranchised, and how can I address that disenfranchisement? Two very different problems, right? And then on top of that, the fact that we're making a considered effort to make sure folks, the whole spectrum of voters, gets to engage. And we're not just talking to the college professors, that we're finding wait a minute, you're in jail, but you can vote. Oh, I'm gonna get you what you need. And so I think it's a matter of shifting the question and shifting where we put our energy. Because I remember in the very beginning when they were starting UU Civs, they were like, we want to go to Ypsilanti, which is the next town over, and it's definitely an economic, social difference. You cross the road and you're like, oh, different town. And they were like, we should just go tell people in Ypsilanti to vote. And I said, no. And so we're going to be more intentional. We're going to do our research, and we're not going to function from assumption. We're going to function from facts. The fact that they went and found a population that actually needs the support, and they're addressing that in a way that's meaningful, to me is like, thank you. And I just encourage folks, don't question who's voting or who's not voting or why they're not voting. Question why they're so disenfranchised that they don't feel empowered to vote, because that's where you make the difference, right?
Yeah. And also, let's be clear about who is putting people like our current administration into power. Like, it is not the Black and brown vote that are putting our current administration into power, folks. So I absolutely agree with Kiana 100%, 110% about disenfranchisement and what we're doing about that. But let's be super, super clear about who needs to get off their ass and get to the polls and change this, because it was not the Black and brown vote that did this. And it's not the Black and brown vote that's going to undo it.
I am not a part of the 52%. That's all I'm gonna say. You can do the math from there. I'm not, and I think we have to kind of really debunk this myth that brown and black folks don't vote. I'm tired of that myth, because it's a myth. We do go vote. In my neighborhood, which is my community, which is mixed, but more brown and black than white, we're there. We're the poll workers. We're the people making sure the line is right. That's all brown people. So it's not that we're not civically engaged. So this myth that brown people don't vote and that's who you need to target your energy towards is false. You need to figure out who the 52% in your community is, and you need to go have coffee with her. You need to go have coffee with them at the local garden. You need to go to the art gallery with her and ask why she voted against her own humanity. That's not a question you need to ask me. I vote towards my humanity. So shift the question, shift the community question, and start to look at your local prosecutors, your judges, and other votes. We as a culture have focused solely on the presidential election every 4 years. And the reality is probably every August and every November, there is a vote happening in your community for a school board person who decides if little black kids get suspended more. There's a prosecutor who's decided you have an ounce of weed, you're going to jail for 10 years, and you had a whole brick of weed, but you're a U of M student. And so you need to be on academic probation. So vote in every election, know who's being voted for and know who's has the power. Prosecutors have so much power in your community, but you're so worried about Trump, you're not realizing the person who put half of your black brothers and siblings in jail is disconnected from Trump. It is the local prosecutor and judges. So I think we need to be re-educated on our civic engagement and our civic responsibility and where it starts. It doesn't start with the president. It needs to start core and keep going outward. And as long as we're focused on the Trump, we're not focused on the person who's at my school board who thinks autistic black girls should be put in isolated classrooms. That's the person who impacts me every day, very differently. Sorry.
Yes. Yes. No, you do not need. Please don't apologize. Yes, and yes. As we near the top of the hour, I want to build on Kiana. You were saying your folks are doing outreach to folks who are in jail but who haven't been convicted yet, and so who haven't been disenfranchised. And I want to just go from there to really remind people that our prison industrial complex dehumanizes people and disenfranchises people on a daily basis. And if I could be a little self-serving, given that this is the Church of the Larger Fellowship. The Church of the Larger Fellowship now has some 1,250 incarcerated members. We serve over 1,200 people who are currently incarcerated, and we are currently trying to raise money to support that program. And Tanner's going to put the link to our Faithify campaign. But we would be very happy to raise more than $13,500 to support our prison ministry, our Worthy Now program. It saves people's lives to have a faith community while they're in prison. It saves people's lives who are LGBTQ in prison and who have a faith community that affirms their humanity. I figured we should plug that as the VUU season, whatever it is, episode 1. Reaches the top of our hour. Chris and Aisha can tell you more, but
yeah, I think that it's super important for folks to recognize that our prison populations are exploding, particularly with COVID. So that the estimate now is the backlog of cases that have not been able to be even heard for arraignment or bail or the first step of each case. They're estimating now to be 2 to 3 years of backlog of cases, which means that
these are people who haven't had a trial.
Right.
Yeah.
These are folks that even haven't had a trial, who may not have money for bail, and are now going to be held in a cage for an additional 2 to 3 years before they can even have the first part of their process. So what COVID is creating and the pandemic is creating and the prison industrial complex is creating is money and work and business for itself for an extended period of time. And so we anticipate that our, if we're doing our job well, that our Unitarian Universalist prison population is going to expand dramatically over the next 2 to 3 years. And we need to be able to be poised to respond to that. So yes, please give generously, give what you can. And we will be back with more about why that's so important.
Amen and ashe. And this was just an amazing debut episode. Thank you all. Thank you to our new co-hosts. Thank you to Tanner Linden, our tech extraordinaire. Thank you, Dawn and Chris, Kiana and Michael. And we will have amazing shows coming. You'll just have to wait to find out the surprise for next Thursday. And I am so happy we moved in. See how awake I am? It is an hour later. Thank you all. Because, I was a little cranky at 8 in the morning. And if it may seem like an hour doesn't make a difference, but it does. So I am just a lot more awake. So have a great week, everyone. Say prayers, make calls, and live your best UU self as you go through your week. And we will see you next week on The VUU. Bye.